Beyond and hello, everyone. My name is Jonathan Dormish from IGN. Today, I am joined by Jacob Lavender, the lead designer on Borderlands 2 VR from Gearbox Software. Jacob, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Jonathan. Yeah, I'm really happy to be here.
Happy to have you. So we're going to be kind of talking over a lot of footage from Borderlands 2 VR, which is coming out December 14th for PSVR.
December 14th.
Super excited. I was a huge fan of Borderlands 2 when it first came out, and I can't wait to jump back into the game. I wanted to talk just right off the bat with you about sort of the impetus for deciding to bring Borderlands 2 to VR.
Oh, yeah. Borderlands 2 was a fantastic game, and one of our programmers actually, a little while back, ended up putting it into VR. We couldn't even move or shoot or do anything in it. We could literally just look at the world. And it was so cool. It was so fantastic that it really put a desire in the people at Gearbox to want to eventually bring this into VR. And so that's where it started. And then one day Randy was like, you know what? It'd be really awesome if I could just walk through and put my gun right up to the bandit and just shoot him right in the face, you know? And we were all laughing around at it, but it really is an awesome fantasy to be there and see how massive the world is. With your feet on the ground and your hand on the gun.
Yeah, I've always been, one of my favorite things about Borderlands is, as a franchise, is the sense of place that you have in it and being in that world. And so to actually step in, I put on the visor and played for a little bit, and to actually be in that world, it's like, oh wow, this beautiful, colorful, crazy, violent world is now right in front of me. I'm wondering, so you were talking about the first sort of step was someone just put it into VR and you could just look around. Where did the team go from there in terms of about this project?
So at that time, it wasn't really the right time to bring it to VR. So this was, several years ago. But once we had some people who had a little bit more experience with VR, this is not our first VR project. It's the first one that Gearbox is going to be presenting, but the team has had some other experience. So we've gotten used to how to bring comfort to VR, how to bring the experience to VR, and feeling comfortable there. And once everything was right, once we had the right team, the right people, that's when we pulled the trigger.
It's awesome, and I love sort of the promise of that. This is actually everything you know about Borderlands 2, right? It's all the same content, it's everything together. Does it include, for those who may not know, all of the extra DLC and all that content in the package?
It doesn't. It's just the base game with the base 4 Vault Hunters. And everything that you could do in the vanilla base game, you've got in BL2 VR.
And so we're checking out gameplay with the two PlayStation Move wands right now. So can you tell me a little bit about this controller setup and how it works?
Sure. We do actually support both the wands, the Move controllers with PSVR, and we also support the DualShock 4 gamepad. The wands is, in my opinion, the best way to play. You really have so much freedom. And to move around, to shoot, you can just look wherever you want to go and aim with your own hand to shoot at the enemies that are coming at you and knock them away. You really have the most freedom with that setup. And then I think the most exciting thing is really to be able to just walk up to an enemy and punch them in the face with your wand.
It's satisfying.
Yeah, it's like
fun
you're there.
to do. Yeah. And so tell me a little bit about, we're seeing it in the gameplay as we go, but the movement-wise, it seems like there's both the teleporting option and then just sort of a standard walking around. Can you tell me the difference between them?
So you got your mover and you got your shooter.
Yeah.
In the left hand, most of the time you're going to be using that to move, and your right hand you're going to be using to shoot. So with the gun in your right hand, you aim where you want to shoot, and then with your left hand, with your mover is what we call it, the Mobile Operations and Violence Enhancement Rig.
Nice.
Yes. So we like acronyms.
Of course.
Over at Gearbox. And you point wherever you want to go. So if you want to move forward, you point with your mover forward, and you hold down the move button, and you'll actually just move off in that direction. If you want to move backwards, you just aim it backwards, you move backwards. You move left to strafe and point right to move right.
And then you also have the teleporting option.
And then we also have the teleporting option. Yes. So one of the things we definitely wanted to do was have options for everything. And we knew that our players would want teleporting. We knew that our players would want direct movement, to be able to just walk like you did in Borderlands 2. Like, hey, I want to play it like I played it the first time.
Yeah.
And that's there. That's there for you. You have everything that you need. But the other thing is, when we introduced teleporting, it was so cool and it's so much fun that it ended up kind of being an asset in the user's arsenal. To be able to teleport around and get behind enemies, get to these places that you couldn't really get to before. So our default option is actually to have both teleport and walk at the same time.
Okay.
And it ended up being really useful for players, and you ended up getting this sort of sensation that you are a complete and total badass because your movement is more enhanced than it's ever been before.
Yeah, and so I wanted to jump in. We just saw this in the gameplay, but essentially a sort of quick reverberation came out of the character, and then everything sort of slowed down. Can you tell me what that system is?
Okay.
Because that's new.
So, Bamf Time is our slow motion mechanic.
Perfect name.
Yeah, Bamf Time. Bamf Time is possibly one of the coolest features to come out of this this port. It's called Badass Mega Fun Time. Once again, we really like those acronyms. And it slows down time to 25% speed, and you get 6 seconds to shoot everything that you can, hit everything that you can, get to the right spot. But every time that you kill an enemy, you get an additional 2 seconds.
Okay.
The other thing is these rings that we were talking about, right? So those rings push enemies back. They throw them backwards with force. And it ends up becoming this thing where you are the rock of your world. You walk around and you just knock everything away. It's primarily for comfort so that you don't have to worry about enemies getting up close in your face, but it is the most satisfying feeling to have 4 enemies coming up at you and you're like, no. No, watch this. And you press Bamf Time, activate it, and knock all those enemies away and shoot them all in the face. You feel like a total badass.
That's I mean, Borderlands 2 and Borderlands 1 are all so much about giving you this sense of power and in this wacky world, and I feel like that just fits perfectly into it. Is Bamf Time, is that part of your skill tree? How is that integrated in, or does it just sort of stay?
Bamf Time is an ability that you get right after the tutorial is over, and you get it for the rest of the game. But the other thing is you actually get to enhance this with your talent trees. As almost everything else in Borderlands 2, it's all about progression.
Yeah.
And we wanted to tease you a little bit at the beginning, like, hey, here's this really cool ability. Get a little good with it, and then we're going to give you some talents that make it different. Now you want to use it in a completely different way. So one of the talents that we actually have is, for Maya, we added in this new talent called Empathy. And it deals damage to you in order to deal damage to the enemy whenever you phase lock them. So
Interesting.
It sounds a little confusing.
Yeah.
But whenever you press Bamf Time, now your healing is doubled. So you've got this sort of gameplay where your health is popping down and then popping back up, and the restoration tree feels different than it ever has before.
Interesting. Okay, so for players who maybe really got into those skill trees and really dug into them, there's something new to explore and rebalance their characters with.
And the other thing about it is, with these talents being integrated into the skill trees, players will learn Bamf, and then they'll learn this new way to use Bamf as they're progressing through the game. And it just becomes this thing where you're constantly learning and mastering these awesome abilities.
That's awesome. I'm really excited to spend more time with that ability in addition to the huge arsenal of stuff you have to play with in Borderlands. I'm a little curious, you were mentioning about how teleporting became such a big asset, and obviously you have Bamf Time here. Were there any big changes that needed to be made sort of with the difficulty level for players or the scenario level, given the new movement types and the new abilities?
I mean, the difficulty is about the same as what it has been. We tried to make it to feel exactly like BL2 was in difficulty terms. But since this is a single-player experience, we needed it to feel a little bit more tuned for single-player. So we made different decisions in order to make that difficulty feel the way that it should when you're playing through it in VR. Some things are a little bit harder, some things are a little bit easier, but the overall feel of it should be this Borderlands 2 experience.
Yeah, and we're switching over now to a little bit of vehicle combat.
Right.
And I want to talk about that in a second, but you did mention, for those who may not know, it is single-player only. It does not co-op.
It is a single-player only game.
Yeah, was that a big adjustment outside of sort of fine-tuning that stuff as you were mentioning, or since you could play the game single-player beforehand?
Right. It's not necessarily that a lot of things needed to be changed. There's just a lot of things that we could change. So players still have co-op in BL2. BL2 hasn't been changed. We still have that experience, and we don't want to replace it. But what we do want is that when you pick up BL2 VR, it's still the same story, but it's a completely different gameplay. And we wanted to give you that experience that it's like, hey, I've played through this, but now it's different. Like it's new, it's fresh.
Yeah.
And with single player, that was one of those things that gave us the opportunity to put in things like Bamf Time and teleportation, and to really pump those up to 11 and make it as strong as you possibly could be.
Yeah.
To make you a complete total badass, more so than you've ever been before. Because we didn't have to worry about anything like that.
Totally.
messing up the balance of the game.
Yeah, and I love that those changes are facilitating that feeling that, for me, the Borderlands captured so well initially. So, speaking of that feeling of crazy power,
right.
We're in the driving. Tell me a little bit about sort of how that works in VR, especially with the move controllers.
So, in normal BL2, you're in third person, but in BL2 VR, you are the driver. And you can move your head wherever you want and shoot depending on wherever you're looking. But the other thing is you get this sort of frame of reference that you've never had before, this sort of perspective on Pandora. And that's really all about everything that we made. Every decision we made was about getting a fresh perspective on Pandora. First-person driving is one of the most interesting things to come out of this port. Because just the perspective shift completely changes the way you play it.
Yes, yeah.
And it's fun. I mean, it really feels like you're moving through Pandora in a car, and it gives you that sort of Mad Max style feel, right?
Absolutely, yeah. The sensation of speed I got when you first get into the car is crazy. It's like, oh no, this is a Borderlands driving experience. This is not just a car kind of going around the wasteland. When you're sort of pulled back, you do have that sense of how many enemies are around you and everything. But here, it's like you're trying to focus in on one or two guys maybe at a time. Tell me, how did you and the team sort of combat, obviously, motion sickness and everything like that can be an issue for some people. How did you try to be aware of that and cognizant of that?
Sure. So we have a lot of comfort options, and those comfort options don't stop at just first-person gameplay.
Yeah.
They also extend into vehicle gameplay. We have this black vignette that we can put around the screen that really blocks out a lot of the peripheral vision, and it causes players to feel comfortable despite having all of this chaos going on around them. When you're inside of the car, you also have this feeling that you're just driving. We adapted the controls a little bit so that they were a little bit simpler, but also we wanted it to just feel like you were in a vehicle, like you were in a car, and it never felt like that way. It never felt that way in Borderlands 2 base game. So we made some changes to where it would be more comfortable.
Yes.
In first person.
Yeah.
Having that frame of reference of the vehicle is necessary in order to make you feel more comfortable when you're driving around.
Absolutely. And one of those comfort options, to a certain extent for the whole game, is you can either use the move controllers or you can use a standard DualShock 4.
Right.
And the DualShock experience is pretty much the Borderlands 2 experience, people know. Correct?
Similar, yeah.
Yeah, we're seeing a little bit of that on screen right now. So it's largely, you've got the HUD down there. BAMF time is added to the HUD now currently,
BAMF
right?
time's
That
on the
is
HUD.
bottom sort of top right down there,
Akimbo claptrap.
Yeah, I love the way you guys are facilitating everything to allow for people to jump into this experience who may not be used to VR but love Borderlands, and then people who love Borderlands and love VR. You have a lot of options here.
Yeah, some people. Yeah. We added the ability to have the DualShock 4 because some people just want to sit down and play Borderlands. You don't. They're like, hey, I want to experience this new perspective on Pandora as well, but maybe I'm not as mobile, or maybe I don't want to stand up and just swing my arms around and hit enemies. We just provided everything that players would possibly want.
Yeah.
And we made it as good as we possibly could.
Yeah. And speaking of a little bit of the difference, you were talking about standing up and moving. With the move controllers, melee attack is you just swipe, right?
Just swing it.
Yeah, that's great.
We also added so that you can hit loot boxes as well and open them up with your move controllers.
That's awesome.
Just because we wanted to feel like, hey, I'm going to just smack everything, just walk around hitting everything in the game. And you can also hit NPCs in order to get them to react to you,
that's
right?
great.
Yeah,
I love that.
Fun.
Yeah, that's a great way, I think, to integrate the VR into this experience you already know and make it a little bit fresh. Well, Jacob, thank you so much for joining me to talk about Borderlands 2 VR. This comes out December 14th for PlayStation VR, so you can look forward to more coverage of this on IGN. And, of course, for everything Borderlands, you're already in the right place, IGN.